Going on, horror fans? Kid Gore back with another video. This is going to be a special Friday the 13th episode. This should be really fun. Friday the 13th is my absolute favorite horror franchise of all time, so I'll try to do it justice. I just want to say thank you for watching and subscribing. Really appreciate it. I don't have the biggest Friday the 13th collection in the world, but very passionate about the series, and I want to talk about some of the films and just show a little bit of my collection, so should be fun. Let's do this. First I'm going to start off with books. This is Making of Friday the 13th, The Legend of Camp Blood. Really cool book by David Grove. Now, before Crystal Lake Memories, this book pretty much was the encyclopedia for Friday the 13th, I must admit. Just really great information on the films and who did what when. Just an amazing book. Still holds up. Making Friday the 13th, The Legend of Camp Blood. If you're a fan of the series whatsoever, I would highly suggest this book. Really great book. Anyone knows Kane Hodder? He wrote a book called Unmasked. I would recommend this book about his films and his life. This guy has had quite the life, from being bullied as a youngster to his horrible burns, getting into the stunt business. Absolutely unmatched. Such a great telling, in Kane's own words. His story pretty much to the journey to be Jason Voorhees in part 7, 8, 9, and 10. Unfortunately, he was not in Freddy vs. Jason, as we all know. That's all in here. Just a great book. I absolutely love this Unmasked. When I met Kane, we talked quite a while about the making of writing of this book. Very great if you want to learn more about the man and his films. And of course, the one that we all love and know, The Complete History of Friday the 13th, Crystal Lake Memories. This huge book. Pretty much the encyclopedia when it comes to the Friday the 13th films, as far as I'm concerned. This book is just a monster. Huge coffee table book. Unbelievable. Peter M. Bradkey, huge fan of the series. Does a lot for the series. Trying to keep them alive and just give it the justice that this great horror series deserves, you know? Such a great book. Really awesome pictures. Never before seen pictures. Pretty much interviews the entire cast of all the movies that are still around. And even ones who have passed are all in this book. Just a really cool telling of the Friday the 13th saga. Highly would recommend Crystal Lake Memories. That's just a given. It's a huge book, it doesn't even fit on my shelf. Then we're going to get into some documentaries. Not strictly Jason, but the man behind Jason, of course. The mighty Tom Savini. Smoke and Mirrors, the story of Tom Savini. Creation of Jason and many other iconic horror characters. It does definitely tap in on the Jason character. Jason basically was just a myth, like a dream sequence. Jumps out of the lake. Little did Tom Savini know that Jason actually would become a real character in the series. But great documentary. I had the book. This is the documentary, To Hell and Back, the Kane Hodder story. If you're at all a fan of the book, I highly recommend. It's a good companion piece to the book. In Kane's own words, amazing interviews, behind the scenes stuff, just interviews with Robert Englund, Bruce Campbell, Cassandra Peterson, so many people that shared the screen with Kane over the years. And Kane is such a great guy. He comes across as a really great, sympathetic guy. And I met him at a horror convention, and he was just the coolest dude. Really down to earth. You could really talk to him. He was really passionate about what he does. Very passionate about the Jason Voorhees character. So, absolutely. Friday 13th fans, definitely To Hell and Back, the Kane Hodder story. I recommend that. Now getting into strictly Jason. With His Name Was Jason. This is actually the first Jason documentary. This came out right as the remake of Friday the 13th was coming out. I do remember that. And it actually came with a ticket for the new Friday the 13th movie, which I actually did use to see the new Friday at the time, the remake of Friday the 13th, which I wasn't the biggest fan of, but whatever, it is what it is. But still, this is a really awesome documentary if you want to learn who did what, when, and the series. Talks about, just has a lot of great extras, too, that Crystal Lake Memories doesn't have. I love the man behind the mask, the whole panel thing with all the Jasons. That was really cool. Definitely the final cuts from script to screen. Crystal Lake survival guide. Just such a really fun documentary. His Name Was Jason. Which brings us to the main one that most Friday the 13th fans regard as the definitive documentary, and rightfully so, and that is Crystal Lake Memories, the complete history of Friday the 13th. Amazing. You really do have to have some time to watch this, though, because this is a very long documentary, but if you're a fan of the series and Jason, absolute must. Definitely have to see this. Sean Cunningham, Corey Feldman narrates it, Robert Englund, Adrian King, Alice Cooper, Wes Craven, Ari Lehman, Betsy Palmer, rest in peace. Kane Hodder, John Fury, Amy Steele, my favorite final girl for a Friday film, for sure, part 2. Just a really great set. This actually was a Blu-ray, it comes as a Blu-ray with a special bonus disc, which I unfortunately missed out on, which would be awesome to see what else is on there, but this is just such a great representation of the series. If you're at all a fan of the Friday the 13th series, one of the greatest horror franchises ever in history as far as I'm concerned. Crystal Lake Memories. Alright, well that is it. So now I'm going to get into some figures that I have. So yeah, let's just do this. First up, this is one of my favorites. Friday the 13th Part 2 figure. Sackhead Jason. The details on that are amazing. One of my absolute favorite Jasons. Really terrifying Jason too. But the details on Sackhead are amazing. Warranting Gullet / Steve Dash. Steve Dash is the guy who did most of the stunts in the film, so he definitely needs credit, more credit. But this is just a great figure, one of my favorites, Friday the 13th Part 2. I got a couple Friday the 13th Part 3 Richard Brooker figures. This is one of my favorites as well. The detail on this one is awesome. Still in the package, I won't take these out. I just like displaying them in the horror room. I'm sure most horror fans do as well. Such a great representation of Jason from Part 3. Richard Brooker, rest in peace, one of my favorite Jasons. This is definitely the one where Jason got the iconic hockey mask and pretty much became a legend. We have another Part 3. This is a NECA. You see a lot of NECAs in this update. I think NECA is like one of the best companies for horror figures. Just look at the details on that. That is absolutely amazing. Richard Brooker from Friday the 13th Part 3. One of my absolute favorites. Just love it. Definitely. You take his mask off, you'll see the hideous face underneath. Just amazing. I love it. Now we're going to one of my favorites, which is Ted White in Part 4, Friday the 13th, the final chapter. This is another NECA. Really love the detail on this Jason as well. Unbelievable. One of my absolute favorites. Definitely my favorite film of the series as well, which we'll get into. But that is Friday the 13th, the final chapter. Ted White figure from NECA. One of my absolute favorites for sure. Then we're getting into Part 5, which I call a Roy beginning, but nonetheless, even though it's not technically Jason running around killing people, it's the deranged ambulance driver, Roy, it still is a great film. But this is actually the Jason from Tommy Jarvis's scene in the beginning of the film. And I think they did a really good representation with all the worms and maggots crawling on the mask and everything. That's just so fucking badass. One of my favorites. Absolutely love that design. Like I said, NECA is like some of the best horror figures that you'll find for a really reasonable price, I think. Some of these do go out of print, but if you can snag them, snag them. They're really awesome. Definitely worth it if you're a fan. And we got Part 6, Jason Lives. Awesome C.J. Graham. Another one of my favorites, the man behind the mask. Absolutely. Directed by Tom McLaughlin. Awesome film. Great representation of C.J. Graham as Jason from Part 6. Jason Lives. Very cool. And the last and my absolute favorite, not my favorite film of the series, but Part 7, The New Blood, with the mighty Kane Hodder. Amazing NECA figure right here. Absolutely amazing. One of my hands down favorite figures I own. I love the detail. This is the best looking Jason in my view. Might not be the best film in the series, but definitely absolutely amazing. Makeup from Carl Buechler, with Kane Hodder in the immortal role of Jason Voorhees, his first. Somebody let me know if they ever made a Part 8 Jason Takes Manhattan figure. I cannot find one for the life of me. But if they ever did, I'd probably get one of that too. So those are my Jason figures. Hope you enjoyed that. Now we'll get into the movies. Now before the big box set from Scream Factory came out, I had this. I actually had Crystal Lake Memory, I had From Crystal Lake to Manhattan. I don't know where that is at the moment, but that was the first one, besides all the VHS I had back in the day, which I unfortunately got rid of. I wish I would have kept them now. But this is an 8 movie collection for Friday the 13th. 1 to 8 from Paramount. Really cool set. You got a lot of really cool bonus features on here as well. I really enjoyed this Blu-ray. Definitely was one of my favorite ones to own before I got the next thing I'll show you. Pretty much everyone knows this. The beautiful Friday the 13th collection from Scream Factory. Unbelievable. I love the artwork on this. Just absolutely amazing. These are all the films. I'm sure everyone has shown this already. But if you never picked this up, highly recommend them. Friday the 13th, amazing transfer. I'm not too big on, like, you know, the 4K and really crisp transfers. In fact, I think the grainy VHS kind of adds to the appeal of the film. That's just me. Because I remember when I watched these movies growing up, that was one of their appeals, was like the grainy, like really dark, creepy fucking atmosphere, you know? Not like a crisp, you know, clean 4K restoration type thing, but still, you know, it's cool. I enjoy it. The original is where it's at. Wow, what can you not say about Tom Savini's effects at the time, just unbelievable for their time, still hold up. Definitely Ari Lehman is the first Jason, jumping out of the lake. But of course, Adrienne King was a great final girl. And you cannot go without mentioning the late, great Betsy Palmer, who my aunt actually knew and was actually neighbors with. My aunt's not a horror fan whatsoever. In fact, she didn't even know about the Friday the 13th, but she was a friend of Betsy. They were neighbors, and she would always tell her about, I got a little secret in some of her previous films, older films. But, so when Betsy died, it was kind of a close death in a way, it kind of was in the family. I didn't know Betsy personally, but like I said, my aunt knew her, so I heard all about it. But yeah, Friday the 13th, excellent. Going to one of my absolute favorite sequels of all time, Friday the 13th Part 2. Oh my god, this is what us horror fans were waiting years for. Finally, the scenes that were cut, all their gory glory. Especially the pitchfork. The best, man. Lifted straight from Mario Bava's Bay of Blood, aka Twitch of the Death Nerve. Some of those kills from that, but man, either way you slice it. Carl Fullerton was Carl Fullerton was a great makeup effects artist. Tom Savini actually stepped out of Friday the 13th Part 2 because he thought the idea of a Jason running around at Crystal Lake was stupid. And he later said that, wow, was he wrong? And so was Sean S. Cunningham, because Jason was more or less, the little boy who drowned in Part 1, so he was dead, but they brought him back in Part 2, and I think it was a good call, for sure. There's still some parts of that story which I don't understand, like how was he surviving? Nobody saw this mongoloid running around, that's kind of far-fetched. But Friday the 13th Part 2, amazing campfire scene, one of my favorites. Amy Steele is one of my absolute favorite final girls as well. She's just such an amazing person. I met her at Days of the Dead. She's such a great person, really passionate about what she does and the fans. Awesome. But the kills are where it's at, Friday the 13th Part 2. That cop that gets the fucking hammer through the back of the head, that always gets me. And the makeup on Warranting Gillette was awesome. I loved it. Sackhead Jason. Like I said, Steve Dash needs all the credit for all the stunt work, where he's chasing Ginny and gets kicked in the balls and all that. That's all Steve Dash. Definitely deserves the utmost respect from Friday fans. Rest in peace, Steve Dash. Friday 13th Part 2. One of my personal favorites, Friday the 13th Part 3, Richard Brooker in the role of Jason. Now, as we all know, this is where Jason becomes pretty much a legend. He gets his trademark hockey mask. The rest is history, man. I think Chris is a great... Dana Kimmel is a great final girl. Really grown to respect her through the years. Larry Zerner, Shelley, of course. We all love. He's a convention favorite, of course. But yeah, I think Steve Miner did a great job on Part 3. And Jason is a very intimidating presence in this film. I'll never forget the first time I saw Friday the 13th Part 3. It was on USA Up All Night, hosted by Gilbert Godfrey on USA. And I was just a little kid, I haven't really seen much at that time. But the part where Jason looks at Chris when Chris is in the boat, and Chris sees Jason looking out of the window, maskless with all the blood coming off of him, and he's smiling at her and scratching at the window and shit. That was terrifying, man. I had nightmares about that for a long time. But Richard Brooker is great in the role of Jason Voorhees, for sure. Which brings me to my favorite Jason of all time, Part 4, final chapter, Ted White. Ted White really wasn't proud of this film for the longest time, but it eventually, seeing the appeal by fans, he eventually came out of his shell and started to embrace the final chapter and his work in it. And he did a really good job as a stuntman. This guy was like a stuntman for like John Wayne, and just, he really was one of the best stuntmen for Friday the 13th films, alongside with Kane Hodder, you know. He really knew his shit and really knew how to create some amazing, timeless stunts. And of course, Corey Feldman is young Tommy Jarvis in this. I gotta say, Crispin Glover with his famous... I can't do it. With that dance, you know. He's known for. Kimberly Beck is a great final girl. And you really feel the chemistry between Tommy and Trish. And I like that brother and sister bond that they have. And this is like the first Friday the 13th, I think, that has like more of a family dynamic going on, where you really care about the characters in this film, whereas the other ones are kind of throwaways. Even though I did care for Jeannie in part 2, and I did care for Alice in part 1, I think the final chapter is where you have that really good chemistry between the family, between the mother, Trish, and Tommy Jarvis. I think it's really cool. And the gore effects by Tom Savini, you know, he comes back because he gets to kill the monster that he created in the original. I just think that's really fucking awesome. The final chapter is definitely one of my favorites. Probably, it is my favorite, hands down. I love it. That part where Trish goes through the window, where Jason is chasing her up the stairs, and she just does a swan dive out of the window. That still gets me, man. I could talk for hours about final chapter. This is my favorite. Coming to part 5, A New Beginning. You big dildo, eat your fucking slop. Tell him like you mean it, Mom. Would you shut the fuck up? So many great lines in The New Beginning. Of course, with Ethel and her son. Oh man, some of my favorite characters in slashers, especially 80s slashers. You just awesome. I like the beginning with the flashback scene where a young Corey Feldman, Tommy Jarvis, sees Jason. You know, that's awesome. And he's got those grave robbers open his grave, and he's got like worms and shit crawling on him. I thought that was awesome. But then it kind of cuts to, I don't know. When I first saw this film, I'll admit I was a bit confused and I felt a bit cheated, as I'm sure most fans did. But honestly, I really do love this film. It is one of my favorites for the characters alone. Even though it's a deranged ambulance driver, Roy, going around killing these kids, wearing a bald cap, which is fucking hilarious. Because after he falls off the fucking barn, you know, you see him go through those spikes. Awesome. Also, Joey, the handicapped fat guy who gets hacked to shit over a candy bar. Wow. Vic was a very, very mad man, I guess. But still, I love A New Beginning. It's always fun. It's got a great soundtrack as well. One of the things, many things about Friday the 13th is Harry Manfredini's score. I forgot to say that in the first one. I met him at Days of the Dead. Just an amazing, down-to-earth, no egotistical bullshit with him. He was just so awesome. Sat down, talked to you about anything you wanted. You know, he talked to me about Slaughter High, which he also did music for. He also did music for The Children, which I liked. But his score for these Friday films are just unmatched. Some of the creepiest scores for a slasher. Amazing. Now the fans were all pissed that Jason wasn't technically in A New Beginning, even though he kind of was in Tommy's mind, I guess you could say. Comes Jason Lives, Part 6. This is basically where Jason becomes zombie Jason, I guess you could say. Brought back to life Frankenstein style. Tom McLaughlin was I think I said Ted last time, I'm sorry. I meant Tom McLaughlin, who also did another movie I love called, what the hell's that movie called? One Dark Night. That was an awesome fucking movie. Really gothic with corpses rising and everything. That was fucking cool. And you can see his love for all like the classic Universal monster movies when he puts into this. Like I said, the lightning bolt that brings Jason back to life, and there's as many puns throughout the film. Karloff, I think, won. Cunningham Road, Carpenter. Like, there's a lot of horror wink-winks at the audience, because you can tell this guy was a legit fan of the horror genre, which is really cool. And yeah, some people kind of say like this is where it kind of took a comedic role. I can kind of see that, especially with Roy the paintballer, who hits, saggy tits Jason in the chest, and that's amusing. But when they get CJ Graham under that mask, definitely turns badass. CJ Graham is a great Jason, and Friday 6 is a great. I like the whole the idea of a kids camp too. That's new, where you got these little kids camping, and you got this maniacal killer running around it. And of course the sheriff thinks it's Tommy Jarvis, and then he's trying to warn everybody that Jason is back. Can't go without mentioning Horshack getting fucking punched in the chest. But part 6 is great. One of my favorites. I like that last scene where Jason's eye is looking out of the water. That's cool. Which brings us to part 7, The New Blood. This is Kane Hodder's first foray into the character, which would immortalize him, basically. Directed by Carl Buechler. Definitely butchered by the censors. A travesty to the series that this film, the unfinished film, uncut Carl Buechler's vision was never put to screen. I mean, you can see like the deleted scenes, but for the most part, it's not really the goriest like it should have been. And somebody like Carl Buechler, who would go on to work with Kane again in the Hatchet series and all that, you would think there would be a lot of red stuff. But Carl Buechler did the effects for a movie called Prison, and that's how he met Kane Hodder. And then when I think it was Frank Mancuso Jr. or someone at Paramount was saying, who do you want to play Jason? Definitely Kane came to mind, and definitely immortalized him in this role. Can't think of Jason without Kane Hodder, and Kane Hodder without Jason. The two are just so intertwined. And he loved this character. He loved playing this character for the fans. Nothing but respect for Kane Hodder. It's got the greatest kill, the sleeping bag scene, which is Kane's personal favorite kill in the whole series. The axe to the bitch's face and thrown around the TV. And of course the burn at the end. Jason's burn, on-screen burn. I think that actually held the record for the most on-screen burn for a long time. Kane did. So he's got a lot to be proud of, even though he wasn't in Freddy vs. Jason, which is a big bummer to the series, in my opinion, at least. We got some great films with Kane as the character. Part 7, New Blood. Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, or as I call it, Jason Takes the Love Boat. Or you could call it Jason Takes Vancouver if you really want to get down to it, because half this film pretty much was filmed in Vancouver and then a couple days in Manhattan. But most of it takes place on this boat called the Lazarus, which is a creepy boat, very creepy boat. And it sets the atmosphere for a Friday the 13th movie too, because it's totally ahead of its time as far as boat horror goes, chasing these teenagers around on a boat, which is a pretty terrifying premise, because if you're on a ship, where the hell are you going to go, And of course, Jason sabotages the whole voyage, and just shit gets crazy. Of course, the ship sinks, and on their way to New York, which is a whole nother awesome sequence. The ending is the thing that probably is most disappointing, personally. Yeah, that ending is still to this day, that still is weird, But whatever. Kane Hodder did a great job as Jason, I think. Julius's kill where he gets his head punched off, the best. No bad movie, love it all. Which brings us to one that really pissed the fans off. Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday. Now, I remember when this movie came out. I remember seeing the commercials, the trailers for it and everything. Never got to see it in the theater. I was too young. But remember when it came out in the VHS stores, I would go and rent it. And I remember that this cover, actually. And it had like an embroidered, it was really cool. Took it home, watched it, heard about it in Fango, saw Kane Hodder interviews, and really wanted to see the film, and took it home, watched it. Enjoyed the first opening of it. It's total Friday the 13th with Jason terrorizing that really hot chick. Then when they blow him away, it's like, holy shit, man, really? It totally takes a different turn, and you got this Creighton Duke character, and then Jason can pretty much go from body to body, which, I don't know, it pisses a lot of the fans of the series off, but I don't know, I've kind of grown, I grew up on this movie, so I kind of hold a special place in my heart, in a way, so I don't mind it. I think there's worse films in the series than Jason Goes to Hell, but I can get the fact that people wanted more Jason. And the director of this, Adam Marcus, was really young and a fan of the series when he made the film. But, yeah, it is what it is. You either like or you hate it. I'm kind of in the middle. I don't mind it. That opening, though, is the best, man. Jason Goes to Hell. Which brings us to one of my least favorite films in the series, Jason X. The whole concept of Jason in space. It was a film made by fans for the fans. I get that. But playing as a Friday the 13th film, even though Jason Goes to Hell technically wasn't even a Friday the 13th film, this is when New Line, took over. After, Jason Goes to Hell, that was the first New Line. So leaving Paramount to New Line, they had rights to Freddy Krueger too, which is what I should say. That, Freddy's glove comes up and grabs Jason mask at the end of Jason Goes to Hell, which of course would totally mark that those two would meet, We thought we were going to get it, but we didn't. Instead, we got Jason X because this project was on back burner, Freddy vs. Jason. Jason in space. The kills are cool. Kane Hodder, unfortunately, this is his last appearance as the character, which is really a tough pill to swallow because he brought so much emotion to the character, I think. And he was Jason, basically. But, yeah, Jason X, either like or not. Uber Jason, I don't know. I could do without it. I'm not really a big fan of Jason X, honestly. Freddy vs. Jason, this movie holds the record for most times I've ever seen a movie in the theater. Me and my friends all went. Me and my girlfriend went. I've saw this fucking movie so many times in the theater. It was like really good theater to watch because everyone was cheering when Jason and Freddy were on the screen. It's another classic example of made by fans for the fans. And we've been anticipating a Freddy versus Jason meeting since God knows how many. But I think as a film, it's fun. It's a fun popcorn movie. If you're a fan of Freddy, if you're a fan of Jason, you're going to eat this up. My only gripe is some of the characters are kind of meh. And, of course, Kane Hodder not getting the role as Jason because all we wanted to see for years is Kane Hodder kick Robert Englund's ass. It didn't happen. Ken Kirshner, I think his name is. He did a great job as the character, but I think Kane would have brought more of an emotional side to it. And it would have been interesting to see what Kane would have done if he would have been the character, but it is what it is. Freddy vs. Jason. Good kills. It's just fun. It's just fun. And I'm sorry, but this is my least favorite in the series, and this is the remake. I'm not a fan of this movie. I do kind of like how they brought 1, 2, 3, and 4 together in a way. I love the opening. One of the longest title cards I think, in horror history. But the whole sleeping bag on fire, that was fucking cool. I'll give it that. That was cool. And then when he gets his mask, that's really cool too. That's a cool moment. But the characters, I just didn't care about anybody in this movie. I really didn't. I just pretty much wanted Jason to kill everybody. And the whole thing where Jason turns into like Jigsaw and has like all these traps and, you know, around Crystal Lake. It's like, really? That was very far-fetched. Not like Jason was far-fetched to begin with, but just the fact that he had a bunch of traps and I don't know. Like I said, I didn't really care for many of the characters. Really hot chicks, nice tits, yes. It has a lot of TNA, which you want in a Friday the 13th film. And I think Derek Mears did a great job as Jason as well. I liked how he was like more mobile and more, you know, brutal, you know, really fast paced. That was cool. It was kind of like from 2, 3, and 4 in a way. See, he was kind of channeling Steve Dash, Richard Brooker, and Ted White, where he was kind of running more, you know. I thought that was cool. But, and I do like the scene with the boat. That was fucking cool. And I do like the arrow. I like that part where Jason is just waiting for his victim, where he's on the land and he's just waiting for that chick to come up shore. I always thought that was creepy because what the hell would you even do, man? That's a pretty creepy moment. But that's Friday the 13th remake. And the last thing in this beautiful box set is this Friday the 13th collection with all the bonus material. I mean, I would highly recommend this whole set. It's just a Friday fan's dream come true. You probably all know this already if you're a fan of this series. Just an amazing box set. I never leave home without it. It's just an amazing box set. Comes with this cool write-up on the films. Very cool. I'm sure you've seen all this if you're a fan of the films and a fan of Jason Voorhees. So, now that we're in the F's, I figured I would do a special Friday the 13th presentation because it's my favorite horror franchise of all time, and it was a lot of fun to do. And like I said, I don't have the greatest collection in the world, but, you know, Jason means a lot to me from being a young horror fan growing up. I just grew up with the movies, and they hold a special place in my black heart. And hopefully you enjoyed this. So thank you all very much for watching and subscribing. I really appreciate it. Jason forever, and Gore forever. Binky's a big Jason fan too. Want to say something? Yeah, you big Jason fan? All right. Take care, boils and ghouls. Gore forever.